Are you ready to make history? My brothers and sisters, we are in fact making history. We are transforming this election. We are transforming this country. It is my great honor to be with you this afternoon. I feel somewhat inadequate because of the great presentations that have preceded me. I don't know if I have much to say, but I think that it's been laid out. I think for most of us, we have our marching orders. We understand what we have to do. We understand the mission that we have to transform this society as we are in the process of transforming ourselves. We understand, I think, our historical task. So I want to share with you, what we've been doing and why this mission is really so important. Just to kind of reinforce that. In October, historically, so-called third-party efforts, they began to lose some momentum. People who have a sense that they want to have an alternative and they will express their support for a third party. When it gets to October, people start, becoming, influenced by that traditional argument that, to support a third party is to waste your vote. And we understand that in this election, that argument is even more stronger because of the kind of individual that the Republicans have allowed to emerge. But something very interesting is happening here in October. That instead of us losing momentum, we are in fact gaining momentum. You see, let me share with you. You can feel it. When you're out here, I know you are doing work, and you might be picking up some of the same kind of vibes that we're picking up. As you talk to people, and people are really beginning to take a second look at this Green Party effort in our campaign. As we move across this country, we are seeing something that is not being picked up by the polls. It's under the radar. There's something here that's bubbling up here in this country. When we talk to people across this country, they say, Ajamu, Dr. Stein, we heard the arguments and, we're concerned about a Donald Trump. But we also understand that we have to fight, and we don't believe that either one of those two parties really care about us and are willing to fight for us. They say that because, they tell us that, there's a so-called recovery. That after these gangsters collapsed the economy in 2008, they come back around and they say that, things have gotten better. After they bailed out the banks, after they printed up money to the tune of $85 billion a month, and they called that quantitative easing. When they forced people basically out of the job market. And then they come back with these stats that say that, unemployment has been reduced, that the economy is coming back. But people are saying, you know what? We don't feel that. We don't see it. But yet everybody, Democrats and Republicans, are telling us things are in fact better. And so they say, we've got to have an instrument. We've got to have a weapon that is going to stand up for us. When we move places like Chicago, and we tell people, we heard that things are getting better here. And young people in Chicago will say, look at the reality. When we say, what we heard in Chicago, there's all this violence in Chicago. And they say, well, okay, there's violence, of course. But if you look beneath the violence, you have another story. They say that, look at what's happening in these communities where we have all this violence. And they brought out the stats. And it said, Ajamu, they say things are getting better here, but look at this. You look at 16 to 19-year-olds. in these same communities where we have all this violence, and you have 60, 70, 80% unemployment among young folks. And they say, how do we live? How do they expect us to live? When you look at how they have been closing down schools in Chicago and forcing us to have to move across into neighborhoods that we normally don't move into. That's one of the reasons why we have some of this violence. And why are they closing schools? Why are they making us go into classrooms where they have 50 students and more? And they say they wonder why we have so much tension in our communities. They tell us things are getting better, but where are they getting better at? Okay? When you look at the housing situation in Chicago, when you look at housing across the country, you know, David talked about the fact that part of this mission that we are involved in with this campaign is that we just don't talk to people. We talk to people, of course, but we try to link in and get a sense of what people are going through. So you talk about housing here in this country, and we know that for the last 2 decades, 3 decades, they've been systematically eliminating funds for housing. We see the consequence of that. When we go to Baltimore and we talk about the housing crisis, we don't just have that conversation. We go down and we go to the streets and we sit down and we talk to people, and then we live on the streets for a night to see how it feels to walk one night, to walk around and not know where you're going to lay your head, and to know that there are almost 1 million people every night who are in that same situation, who don't know where they're going to lay their head. That's what we do as the Green Party. So we sleep with the homeless, and we talk to them, and we bring out the cameras and allow them to tell their stories, because they have stories. We want to hear, how did you end up here? And when you listen to their stories, you find that, you know, what's that saying, for the grace of God goes I? That basically it is so easy to end up on the streets like that. And we hear those stories. When we talk to people about what is happening with health care, and we said, you know, they tell us that with the Affordable Care Act, things are better. That, you know, we don't have any real issues with medical care here in this country. And we all know that that's not really the truth. And people will share with us their horror stories that they're still going through. We talked to the worker in Atlanta that had a good job, a decent job. He's a security man. But what happened was, as a consequence of the Affordable Care Act, when these small companies needed to avoid paying their fair share for health care, the strategy that they engaged in was to do what? To cut the workers down to part-time. And basically he got cut down to part-time. And then, you know, he couldn't even, you know, get on the Affordable Care Act and get a premium that he could afford. So basically now he's 57 years old, walking a security guard job with no health care and part-time. And he says, where is the progressive intent around this? These are the kind of stories that we hear, okay? And that's why when we talk to people, say, you know what? This campaign has a program. It has a position. It has a position for jobs. We said we can transform this economy and that we can create 20 million new jobs in clean, renewable energy, and people listen. When we tell people that for housing, we're going to wipe out homelessness because we're going to raise up housing as a fundamental human right. We're going to restore funding for housing. And they listen. When we say that we're going to have a single-payer system, Medicare for all, that is, I've seen that people don't have health care, they listen. We have a story to tell, my friends, and people are listening, and they're coming to us. When we look at the issue of criminal justice, we talk to folks, and we know folks, and we struggle with people in the Black Lives Matter movement. And we look at their platform, their list of demands. And we can have a conversation and we say, you know what? We're on the same page. Because you look at what you are demanding in your platform, and you look at our platform, and you know what? It's almost word for word the same positions. We say that it is obscene that we have a situation in this country where police, who are supposed to be the guardian of the public, who are there to protect and to serve, are waging a war against black and brown people here in this country. And they are doing that because there is an atmosphere of impunity. Because we have a federal government that's only sought to prosecute one of these killer cops over the last few years. And we say that we in solidarity with you when you make a demand that says we have to have real accountability. We stand with Black Lives Matter because we understand that we can't have a democratic society, a society in which there's supposed to be human rights, where you have systematic state violence here in this country. And they appreciate that, and they stand with us. When we understand that basically we have this kind of mission, it makes things much more clearer for us and for people who are trying to bring to our party and to this commission, to this campaign. When we talk about criminal justice, we go beyond just talking about police brutality. We talk about the fact that we have a position on mass incarceration, that we understand and we recognize the connection between police violence and repression and mass incarceration. And all of those organizations, all those groups are involved in struggle to deal with that issue. We can talk to them and show them that we have the same positions. We say it's obscene and backward that we have 2.1 million people who are incarcerated in this country. When we go to Michigan, we go and we talk to a Reverend Pinckney, who is a political prisoner in Michigan, a reverend who attempted to stand up against the Whirlpool Corporation in Benton Harbor to protect the black community that was under fire from this corporation. And as a consequence of that, he was set up and imprisoned. And what was he convicted of? Well, they had a recall petition for the local Democrat black mayor who was trying to block an attempt to make the Whirlpool Corporation pay their fair taxes in their city. And so they had a petition drive, and they collected petitions to have a referendum. They submitted the petitions, and before they started to look at those petitions, the authorities said, you know what, wait a minute, something looks kind of funny with 5 or 6 of these petitions. It looks like someone changed the dates. And they claimed that Reverend Pinckney was the one that changed the dates on a petition, on 6 petitions. They brought him to court. He says, you know what, I never thought there'd be any problem at all. This is America, right? Well, he was convicted and was given 30 months to 10 and a half years in prison. Okay? So we went to Michigan and we went and we talked with Reverend Pinckney because that's what we do. We did that to raise up his case because, you know, people forget those kind of individuals who are on the front line, who are fighting. We don't get the recognition that they deserve. That's what we do in this campaign. We went to Flint. Everybody heard about Flint, Michigan, right? Okay. Well, you know, now that most of the cameras have gone and many of the people who tend to kind of parachute into these movements have disappeared, we went to Flint to talk to folks, to see what was going on. And we found out that basically that they have the same issues they had 2 years ago. They still cannot take showers. They still have to bring water in from the outside. Okay? Things haven't changed for them. But you know what? They were so appreciative of the fact that we were there and we were able to bring, you know, some attention to that ongoing struggle because, of course, the media came out, you know. That's the kind of work that we do here in this campaign. As David and others have said, we link up with the people. because we understand that we are in a protracted struggle, that this is about shifting power back to the people. And this campaign becomes an instrument for that, okay? We understand that the only way we're going to deal with issues of race and poverty, we've got to struggle and we got to build power, you know? So that's what this campaign is all about, and that's the kind of mission that we are on. We have a world to win. It is very important for us to remind ourselves of that. That, you know, we might have small numbers today, but we can see around the bend. You know, we have these conversations and we see what people are dealing with, and we see how they are becoming closer to us. We understand that this Green Party and building this alternative movement is in fact the wave of the future. And that's what keeps us going. We have a chance to come and have conversations with you all and see the kind of energy that you're bringing to this process, and see the kind of work that's being done with these chapters and organizing. I mean, this is exciting. This is happening all across this country, you know, and that's what is happening that, you know, the pundits don't seem to understand. They can't tap into because they don't recognize it, they don't see it, but we do. And we have to remind ourselves of this sacred mission that we're on. We go to North Dakota, not because we're going out for a photo op, but we're going because we understand again that we have to link up with the people who are in motion, the people who are in struggle. Now, we didn't go out there to get arrested necessarily, but you know, but those things happen, you know? Because the people, you know, you just can't go and just be rapping, you know. You have to sometimes demonstrate your solidarity. And when they wanted Jill to be locked down on a piece of machinery, we knew that we really couldn't do that day. That wasn't part of the plan, you know. We had to move. We said what we'll do. We will show our solidarity and leave a message here, and that's what we did. Now, we never knew that, you know, that's when we get caught on tape, and then it's going to result in an arrest warrant, and that's all right. Our concern is not with me and Jill. Our real concern, if I was happening in Standing Rock, is with those dozens of people who are in jail today, with the aggression that we see coming from the authorities and the private thugs that the company hired. We want to raise that up and remind people that that is an ongoing struggle, and that's why the Green Party was there then, and the Green Party is there today. That's the kind of work that we do. We do that work, my friends, because one of the principles we have centered in this campaign is the notion of human rights. That, as David and others talked about, you know, it is the idea that each and every one of us has inherent dignity, inherent value. And that what that means is, as a human being, we have a right to the kinds of things that we need to have in order to live dignified lives. That's why we say that, you know, we have to have a wage at which people can live. That's why we support a minimum wage of $15 and above just to be able to live. We are for a living wage. We redefine housing as a human right. We redefine healthcare as a human right. We say that we have a fundamental right to live in an environment that's free of pollution, where we have clean water and air we can breathe. We have fundamental human rights. We say that no one should be subjected to the kind of fear that people have when they are driving their car and a police car pulls up behind them. We can't live like that. We're not going to live like that. We have centered this notion that we have fundamental human rights. But we also understand that it's not enough just to assert those human rights. That for us to be able to realize human rights, we have to fight for them. But there's another element to our commitment to human rights. And that is this. We're not just going to look at what is happening in this country. We're not going to have a U.S.-centric perspective in which we're only concerned about the human rights of people in this space we call the United States of America. We understand that for us to be human rights advocates, we've got to take responsibility and struggle against the actions and the policies and the programs of this state when it comes to how it relates to people around the world. If we don't struggle against this state that's involved in the systematic violation of the human rights of people around this world, that basically we become complicit ourselves morally. So we have a responsibility to fight for all people who are oppressed. We don't have the luxury, and we definitely don't have the moral standing to support the kinds of backward activities that this state is involved in. We have a responsibility to stand up and say, we're concerned about what is happening in Syria because we're concerned about all life. And we are concerned about the consequences of war. But we're also concerned about what is happening in Yemen. If you're concerned about humanitarian issues in Syria, then you have a moral responsibility to talk about what's happening in Yemen. And if you don't know what's happening in Yemen, you got a responsibility to find out. Because your government, this state, is involved in both of those situations. That is vitally important. You can't talk about upholding human rights, and yet you say nothing about the destruction that's taking place still in Libya. You can't talk about respect for human rights and black lives if you don't know what's happening with policies undertaken by this government and the UN in Haiti. You can't really critique and criticize Hillary Clinton completely if you don't understand what the Clinton Foundation has been doing and is responsible for in Haiti. If you care about democracy and human rights, you can't allow the Clinton campaign, Hillary Clinton specifically, to get away with the notion that they stand up for human rights if you understand the record of both the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. We have to raise up the role that Obama and his Secretary of State played in giving a green light to the coup in Honduras. We have to remind people of all of these other situations that people have forgotten about. We have to remind people that Hillary Clinton and Obama were involved in giving the green light again to a coup in Egypt in which the blood ran, like rivers. And they wouldn't even call it a coup. We have to remind people that there was a viable democratic movement in Bahrain where people stood up and said, we want democracy. And they reached out to the U.S. And all the U.S. did, Hillary Clinton did, was slap their hands down and gave a green light to the Saudis to come in and suppress that revolutionary movement. We have to remind people of this kind of situation. So my friends, we say that basically if you're for human rights, you've got to be for human rights all over the world. And we raise these issues about U.S. foreign policy because this, I think, is where we can begin to understand why over the last couple of weeks we've had more people beginning to move toward the Green Party. Because what happened really with the second debate, for the first time, I believe, the American people had a chance to really hear some conversation around where these candidates stood on U.S. foreign policy. Now, I know some of that got sort of obscured with all of the adolescent bickering that was taking place. But many people did in fact listen very closely. And what they heard was troubling. In fact, it was shocking from what people tell us. That what they heard when Hillary Clinton talked about Syria and talked about her position to establish a no-fly zone in northern Syria and what that implies. People were concerned. When people saw the kind of anti-Russian rhetoric being whipped up, preparing us psychologically to be in a conflict with a nuclear-armed nation-state, people were concerned. When they linked that to some of the discussions that they've been reading from American officials who are openly talking about the possibility of a nuclear first strike, people are wondering, is this what we're going to support? If we support Hillary Clinton because we are concerned about another evil in the form of Donald Trump? And they are starting to rethink this fear-mongering. And they're beginning to think critically. And they're beginning to wonder, now this Donald Trump character, the creep that he is, he's at least talking about the possibility of cordial relations maybe, or at least getting along with the Russians, compared to Hillary Clinton, who seems to be ready to go to war with the Russians. And they say, well, we don't want Donald Trump, of course, but damn, do we want Hillary Clinton?
Hell no!
And so they started to understand that a vote for Hillary Clinton may be a vote for war. And they're not comfortable making that kind of decision. And they then say, you know what? The only way in which we can express our opposition to not only the neoliberal, right-wing domestic policies represented by the Clinton campaign, but our concern about the possibility of war, the only way we can express our opposition to that, we've got to support the Green Party. And I think that's why we're seeing the momentum in these last 2 weeks, you know, and in the conversations, and do this as an experiment. Let's talk to more people. Why is it that just in the last couple of weeks you are re-examining your understanding of the Green Party and your possibility of supporting the Green Party? And find out, do an experiment. And I bet you it's kind of connected to these issues of war and peace. And that's fine because they are making the correct decision. The only way that we're going to have a viable oppositional democratic movement here in this country, we've got to have an instrument that represents the best interests of our people and the highest values. We cannot allow for the new configuration of the elite that's taking place right now with inside the Democratic Party. We've got to recognize that there's a new kind of political realignment where the right, the more moderate right, has moved from the Republican side to the Democrat side. And that for progressives who have remained in the Democratic Party, you have decided to become a marginal force because they don't really care about you. That was demonstrated in Philly. That was the whole reason for how the Sanders delegates were treated. That basically they had made a decision that basically you're not going anyplace, and we are reaching out to elements of the right, the elite right, and basically as part of the so-called big tent strategy, you know, you just go in the corner, sit down, and shut up like you should, okay? But luckily, many of you all and many people across the country said, we have a voice, we have an understanding of the world, we have principles, and we have dignity, and we're not going to surrender to a right-wing party. So my friends, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do to make that space available. You know, it's funny because, you know, this strategy of expanding the party, you know, a number of people thought it was going to be sort of a secretive strategy until they in fact had contact with the party and understood that that in fact is the broad strategy of everybody in the party. That we have to open up this party and build it, you know, because we are in fact the future. So my brothers and sisters, it's been a pleasure to be here in this space this afternoon. I want to lift you up and thank you for the work that you've done, the progress we've made here in California, and just to remind you again that, you know, we have, what, 2.5 weeks to go or so? You know, we're going down the stretch, you know, but we have to fight. Now, Jill and myself, we are struggling. In fact, that's one reason why our sister Jill's not with us this afternoon, because she's been on this road for a long time. And, you know, I wish David was here. David can't get her to take a rest, even when it was clear that she was getting a little under the weather, because she's so dedicated. But I think that we have convinced her to take a day off, at least for tomorrow, before she comes back on Monday. But it's rough out here. But it's a good rough, you know, and that's why we can't keep her away, because, you know, we get energy when we come and we get a chance to meet you and look at you and talk to you. You know, that's how we get our energy, okay? And it keeps the spirit going, you know, and that's why I love to do it myself. So my friends, let's go ahead and keep on struggling. Let's build this party, because I think that what we're going to see on November the 8th, we're going to, what Muhammad Ali said, another thing he said, we're going to surprise the world. We really are. So my friends, don't let anybody tell you that we can't do it. As Jill's son always says, the power is in our hands when we understand the potential power that we have. Let's build this power for ourselves. This is a struggle to bring power back to us. It's not in our hopes, it's not in our dreams. It is indeed in our hands. Power to the people. 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 Power to the people.
Give it up for our vice presidential nominee, Ajamu Baraka.